Howdy folks, I'm Jenny G, and today's March 31st, 2021. Godzilla vs. Kong is now in theaters, Ewan McGregor celebrating his 50th birthday, and Super Mario is about to die. To be specific, the Super Mario 35th anniversary festivities that began in September are ending tonight at midnight Pacific, and with that, a lot is going away. It's time for an Everything Going Away on March 31st Lightning Round! Super Mario 35 is going offline and being delisted. Super Mario Maker for Wii U is going offline and being delisted. Super Mario 3D All-Stars is leaving store shelves and being delisted. The Super Mario Game & Watch is leaving store shelves. The Super Mario Bros. 3 cartoon is leaving Netflix. Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light and Disney Art Academy of all things are being delisted. And those aren't even Mario. What? And that's it for the Everything Going Away on March 31st Lightning Round. It's certainly a choice to go scorched earth with your mascot character's lineup right after his big birthday celebration. Nintendo's been treating this anniversary in a weird anti-Gizmer way that I'm never going to be able to understand. But even if I could, that's not why I'm here today. If Mario only has one more day to live, I might as well spend that day talking about his games, specifically his 3D lineup. Upon the release of Super Mario 3D All-Stars just last September, many criticized the collection for being a rushed cash grab that didn't do anything to improve the three games it slapped together and charged $50 for. And that's not necessarily wrong. It didn't upgrade 64 to widescreen, it didn't update Galaxy to get rid of motion controls, and I'm convinced Galaxy 2 doesn't even exist at this point. Yet, despite the numerous flaws and questionable practices, I will give the collection credit for one thing. It allowed Switch players to experience the evolution of 3D Mario in one easily accessible package. Until it stopped being an accessible package, that is, but that's another whole can of worms. Why is this important? Because just last month, we also got a 3D Mario game that culminates everything Nintendo has learned through 24 years of 3D game development. A game that combines the best elements of its predecessors and works to improve their weaknesses as well. A game that could very possibly be the future of 3D Mario. Yep, I'm talking about Luigi Bros. His companion game, Bowser's Fury. Super Mario 3D World was already one of the best 3D Mario games, so they didn't need to do anything major to hook me into a Switch port. But they did, throwing in a whole new mini-campaign that completely switches things up. What's so special about this inclusion is that it's not just an evolution of 3D World, it's an evolution of 3D Mario as a whole. How so, you might ask? To cover that, we'll need to take a deep dive into Mario's history to analyze what made each prior game tick. We're going to explore how this series has evolved, where it is now, and where it could go in the future. Mario may be going away after today, but we still have time for one last 3D Mario retrospective. So without further ado, let's go! Before 3D Mario was even a thing, the Italian Plumber only existed on the 2D plane. These games are very much focused on pure, linear, capital P platforming. Every level contains a set of challenges that are done in a linear order, each testing one's proficiency in the limited tools provided by the game. Your only way through is forward. Your only tools are to jump, duck, or use a power-up, and power-ups themselves are taken away when you get damaged. With this small scope, it's easy for players to understand how to succeed, and upon mistakes, how they failed. These failures then teach you something new about yourself, the character, or the level, so mistakes never feel like the game's fault. There's a reason that 1-1 in the original Super Mario Bros. Is praised as a bastion of game design. It teaches you everything you need to know so gracefully that you don't even realize you're learning. It's just fun. Yet, where this philosophy worked perfectly for the first batch of Mario games, Nintendo knew that it wouldn't work as well in a 3D space. After all, how do you maintain precision in a 3D environment, which is inherently larger in scope than a 2D plane? After some experimentation, Nintendo's answer was to instead focus on the reverse of their usual ethos. Initial 3D Mario games aren't as focused on platforming, instead being designed around movement and freedom in a vast open world. Challenges are no longer linear obstacles that must be done in a precise way. They're now sparks of the imagination that aren't limited to a single answer. Just look at the first star in Bob-omb Battlefield. Your goal is to get to the top of the mountain and fight King Bob-omb. How do you get there? However the heck you want. You can carefully take the linear main path up the mountain, you can long jump your way there as fast as you can, doing sick flips and speedrun tricks along the way, you can take cool shortcuts that skip the main path entirely, or you can even say screw it and just go for another star. 64 is at its best when it gives you a simple task that you can complete from any angle you want, utilizing your expansive, flowing moveset to navigate these open, freeform worlds. In fact, the moments where 64 is at its weakest are when it veers away from this design to focus on pure platforming challenges. The earlier worlds of 64 focus more on their vast explorable environments, but later ones, such as Tick-Tock Clock, Rainbow Ride, and arguably Tall Tall Mountain, ditch this in favor of slow, methodical platforming challenges that don't utilize Mario's movements in any engaging way. It doesn't help that these levels being later also means they are more difficult, and if you fail on this star in Tick-Tock Clock, there's not many other angles to approach it by when you try again. Instead, you just have to go through the same set pieces over and over again, and the movement of 64 isn't really fun or useful in this context. Trying to make this Mario do this challenge feels like pushing a square peg into a round hole, and the later worlds of 64 suffer for it. Another aspect that is criticized about 64 is the way it pops players out of a level after each star, forcing one to always start from the beginning when they go into another mission. This is at odds with the sandbox design, as you're only so free when collecting a star always sends you back to a certain point. I don't personally hate it, as the worlds are pretty small and easy to navigate, but it is a hurdle that the following sandbox Mario games approach in different ways. And speaking of following sandbox Mario games, Sunshine, for all its flaws, continues this sandbox design philosophy in some very interesting ways. The pop-out system is back, and accentuated. Not only do levels pop you out after each shine, but you can't even approach shines in alternative orders anymore. You're always going to be doing shines 1 through 7 in every world, in that order, on every playthrough. Blue coins are now present as a secondary collectible, but even those are often locked to certain levels, which makes finding them a tedious chore of trial and error. In some ways, a lot of the freedom that 64 touted is almost immediately lost, but in other ways, however, they do still make efforts to innovate. Mario's movement options are now expanded with FLUDD, allowing him to hop, slide, and jetpack through levels like never before. To go with this, the worlds are even larger as well, with Delfino Plaza alone dwarfing the scope of any 64 level. While you can't approach things as openly as before, the worlds are still designed to take advantage of Mario's movement, whether it be swinging off wires in Bianca Hills or jetpacking over the ship in Peanut Park. The structure may be more direct, but movement remains free and flowing. Additionally, the pop-out system allows for a brand new element entirely. Sunshine takes place in one developing, interconnected world. The areas of Isle Delfino are contextualized in one map, and while they're not exactly accessed in a cohesive way, it still adds a feeling of immersion that wasn't present before. The world changes as you collect shines and improve the island, represented by the omnipresent factor of the sun growing brighter as you progress. The areas you explore will change as you find each shine, allowing for unique new set pieces that wouldn't be possible in the way 64 handles things. It's probably the best evolution from 64 to Sunshine, all things considered. Likewise, some of the worst parts of Sunshine are once again when it tries to return to its platforming roots. The bonus levels are kind of trash for the most part. Mario's physics are designed for slipping around Delfino Plaza to snuff out secrets, not methodically jumping on some rotating platforms that you might just slip off or fall through. And it doesn't help that these are again positioned as the hard levels, even though what you learn in the rest of the game doesn't prepare you for what you need here, and vice versa. FLUDD is one of your main tools of the core gameplay loop, so taking that away so often feels like more of a crutch than anything. Part of this is just Sunshine's jank for being a rushed project, but I feel like these levels would still have been the weakest part of the game, even if Sunshine's physics weren't, well, Sunshine's physics. Taking away tools to create a challenge can be interesting, but when those tools are so essential to having fun, it feels like it's taking away the enjoyment. Once again, the sandbox games suffer the most when they're trying to be what they're not. A problem that the next sandbox game finally solves. Odyssey marks the return to form of the sandbox style, committing to it even more than 64 initially did. 64 had smallish worlds that would pop you out after collecting each star, while Odyssey has huge worlds with a ton of moons that can be collected in any order with nothing setting you back. Movement is refined to a T, retaining Mario's usual arsenal but also adding a new buddy, Cappy. This little guy adds even more options than FLUDD did. You can throw them in to jump off for a boost, throw them again in midair to dive into for another boost, then you can wall jump and do that all again. Oh, and did I mention the plethora of captures that you can activate, giving you even more brief but exciting shifts in your moveset? In Odyssey, if you can dream it, you can do it, and usually there's a nifty reward for doing so. As for the main content, each kingdom gives you some set story missions, but they're really nothing more than suggestions. If you want, you can skip most of the story content and just grab whatever random moons you find until you have enough to power your ship. The game rewards you for running off the beaten path and exploring curious elements, but if you choose to do the story, you're also rewarded by the world transforming as you progress. The aesthetic will change and more moons will appear, continuing Sunshine's vision of a developing contextualized world, even if none of the kingdoms themselves are necessarily connected anymore. And yes, I know some people weren't a fan of how plentiful moons are, but I personally don't mind. Yes, grabbing one moon isn't as fulfilling as grabbing one star, but grabbing a ton of moons in succession feels satisfying in a way that grabbing a few stars doesn't capture. Pun not intended. Even with the sandbox style, there are linear portions of the game once again, but Odyssey finally figures out how to handle these well. They're no longer treated as if they're equal to the core sandbox gameplay, with difficulty still climbing despite your tools not being suited for it. Instead, these sections are essentially glorified tutorials. They're basically never hard, and I think that's by design, because instead they serve as a straightforward way to teach you about your moves or captures. Skills that you can then apply into the sandbox environment to find more moons. This sublevel lets you practice capturing bullet bills, and you can apply that practice to get this far out moon in the overworld. It's the best way to mix in some linear variety while still understanding the game's core identity, which is important when you consider that this was the first sandbox Mario game in nearly 15 years. Between Sunshine and Odyssey, there were 4 other 3D Mario games in a completely different style. The next games after Sunshine were Galaxy 1 and 2, and they were the first 3D Marios to start committing to a more linear approach. Platforming is at the forefront again, and Mario's arsenal is more limited to reflect this. His moves don't go as far, and he is very slow. Like, it takes forever to navigate the Comet Observatory, just look at this. On the other hand, though, they add the spin, allowing Mario to correct his movements during precise jumps. And this simple addition really mitigates the issues of imprecision that plagued its 2 predecessors. These linear sections no longer feel out of place, because the whole game is designed around them. They don't limit themselves to contextualized worlds, instead creating wacky, bizarre galaxies that truly and literally go off the wall with their mechanics. The gravity stuff in particular still feels novel to me, especially since not many other platformers have really tried the idea since. I still get a big smile on my face when walking across that first sphere at the beginning. It's such a magical feeling. On top of this, power-ups make their true debut in 3D, not counting the limited and contextual caps of 64. Entire levels are built around the B-suit, Boo-suit, and so on, giving much needed variety to Mario's more simple moveset. Even if they are still really sluggish, but that's part of a bigger issue. Despite many positive qualities, Galaxy still feels like a bit of a half-step in some ways. It's at its best when it uses the linear design to create awesome galactic set pieces to platform through, like Gusty Garden Galaxy and Melty Molten Galaxy. Yet, it spends a lot of time having you revisit levels to do alternate challenges, just as you would in 64 or Sunshine, but that doesn't really vibe with this game's direction. Movement may be more precise, but it's not as inherently fast or fun as it is in the sandbox games, so it sort of just feels like you're slowly retreading the same level over and over with minimal variation, which is most evident in the mind-numbing late-game Prankster Comet stars of Galaxy 1. I never want to see a purple coin again, guys, seriously. Galaxy 2, that mysterious game that supposedly doesn't exist, does improve on this. You rarely visit a galaxy more than twice in the main game, and it focuses even more on always introducing imaginative new power-ups and ideas. The sluggishness is mitigated with, well, better-paced levels, and the inclusion of Yoshi, who is the most fun, snappy, and varied power-up in possibly any 3D Mario game. I really wish this game was in 3D All-Stars, because I think it has a lot of unique merit to set it apart from the first game. Heck, I'd argue it's the better game overall, and it would have been nice to revisit it in full on Switch instead of having to lug out a Wii U to replay it. Furthermore, Prankster Comets still exist, but they aren't the sole focus of the postgame anymore. Unfortunately though, they're sort of replaced by the 120 additional green stars you have to find for 100% completion. With these, you have to tread through these levels again to find arbitrarily hidden collectibles, and yeah, I'm not doing that. This is late game optional stuff, so I can't blame it too much, but like, really? Don't get me wrong, I really like both of these games, and they are a step in the right direction when it comes to linear design in a 3D space. But coming off of two sandbox-style adventures, it does suffer some growing pains. Soon after, 3D Land and 3D World are the point where Nintendo finally fully committed to the linear, platforming-focused 3D Mario. With Galaxy 1 and 2, there were elements of the sandbox design still seeping in. But now, there were no bones about it. This is a point A to point B platformer through and through, and the games are better for this. Each level introduces multiple new ideas that keep them fresh the entire way through, even well into the post-game. You only ever need to revisit levels if you want to hunt for some optional hidden collectibles, which is engaging in of itself. It requires you to approach levels in a different way, not just do the same challenges with changes that are only superficial. Plus, levels are just shorter, which makes replays more palpable. Maybe not clear each of them 5 times palpable when it comes to 100% completing 3D World, but whatever, I'll take it over blue coins or purple coins. Movement-wise, they've struck a nice balance between something more complex like 64 and something more limited like the 2D games. You can only move in 8 directions, the triple jump and ledge grabs are gone, and running is now relegated to a button. But you can still long jump, wall jump, backflip, and so on if you're experienced enough to pull them off. Power-ups are back again, this time in their traditional form, and you can bring them to any level for some universal utility. There's the Tanuki Leaf, allowing for some added leeway in precise platforming moments, the Cat Bell, which lets you climb back to safety or up walls to find secrets, and the rest. The levels are designed around these streamlined systems, and especially with the added speed of 3D World Switch release, the flow of gameplay feels almost perfected for this style. There's just enough limitations to craft interesting challenges around, and just enough options to approach these challenges in engaging ways. It allows these games to shine as some of the best in their genre, 2D or 3D. The only major roadblock with this strategy is that it completely loses the sandbox element that many people loved about the earlier games. 3D World may be a beloved platformer now, but upon its original reveal, people were disappointed that it wasn't something more open or ambitious like 64 or Sunshine. After all, 3D Mario had split into 2 different genres entirely at this point. Both of them are at their weakest when they try to be something they're not and branch into the other form of design. This divide was even acknowledged by Nintendo themselves. You have the 3 sandbox 3D Marios and the 4 linear ones. They're classified separately and everything. As great as both of these styles are, it's odd to see the 3D Mario series essentially experience mitosis. It wasn't always split in 2 like this. Well, after 24 years, Nintendo finally tried to reunify the 3D Mario series with a little bonus experimental campaign, Bowser's Fury. Bowser's Fury isn't just a sandbox adventure with a tiny bit of linearity sprinkled in, and it isn't just a linear adventure with a tiny bit of freedom or backtracking. It combines both philosophies, ingrained into its core design. The challenges are linear, but you are free to explore them in any possible way. Each challenge may look like your typical 3D Land level, but you can handle them in any way you want like your typical 64 level. You can follow this linear path and get a cat shine, or you can find the 5 cat shine pieces hidden throughout and get one that way instead. You can keep trying a level in the suggested linear direction, or you can skip the platforming by searching for a shortcut with the Cat Bell or Tanuki Leaf. You almost always have both options, and neither are inherently better than the other. They finally struck an important balance that was missing before. It's both surprising and not surprising at all that Nintendo took this long to try out this concept. As said before, it's a risky idea in the first place, so it makes sense that they first toyed with it through a shorter bonus campaign. But this shorter bonus campaign might be a better celebration of Mario's 35th than something like 3D All-Stars. Despite its brief runtime, Bowser's Fury is essentially a culmination of 24 years of 3D game development. It combines the best elements of its predecessors while also learning from their weaknesses, creating a melting pot of platforming and catboys that works way better than it has any right to. Of course, from 64 and Odyssey, they take the any-angle approach to each challenge that I've already covered quite extensively. Sure, there's one linear set path that's presented to you, but like 64 and unlike 3D World, it's not required. If you fall too many times, you can just wander off and search for a different shine entirely. You only need enough to summon the Giga Cat Bell after all. Also, unlike 64, there's no barrier stopping you this time. Finding a cat shine doesn't pop you out of the level, and unlike any other Mario, getting from level to level is seamless once you unlock Plessie. On that note, Bowser's Fury is also the first Mario game to take place in one large location with 0 loading screens. Lake Labcat is a fully realized place, similar to what was attempted on a smaller scale with Isle Delfino. The open world isn't just a gimmick either. Fury Bowser exists as a justification for this world to be so connected, grounding each area with one omnipresent factor. And heck, the game even contextualizes core Mario mechanics in ways that weren't possible beforehand. The most obvious example of this can be found from how failure is handled. Instead of falling down bottomless pits and losing a life, you fall down a structure and have to head back to the start to climb it again yourself. Functionally, these are the exact same thing, but there's no longer the downtime of death or a loading screen to slow down the pace. Likewise, rather than a loading screen acting as a buffer between levels, we have the lake, which offers the same function of organizing areas but with a more immersive context. Almost everything you do is tied into the world in an organic way. Yes, it's still made up of floating platforms and silly Marioisms that don't quite match up with how Sunshine handles its world, but the core idea still feels like Isle Delfino taken to its logical extreme. Like the Galaxy and 3D games, every gate offers a new mechanic that tests Mario's moveset in a different way. And this time, the sandbox implementations don't get in the way of the core design. In Galaxy 1 and 2, redoing levels for other stars often didn't add much new to the table. Meanwhile, the remixed missions in Bowser's Fury force you to look at the levels through an entirely different perspective. The key missions, for example, force you to do a level backwards while escorting a key past some newly placed enemies, which is a much more entertaining way to revisit a section than just scattering some purple coins around or adding a time limit. Of course, not all of the challenges are created equally. The Fury blocks suck. There's nothing fun about waiting around for Fury Bowser for a single shine. But overall, I'd say the extra shines in each gate are much more varied than before. And yes, as a whole, Bowser's Fury is far from perfect. Mario's default walk speed is serviceable, but even with that, having to juggle a run button and full camera movement is kind of a pain. The controls are exactly the same as 3D World, which works perfectly fine for the platforming half of things, but I feel like they should have made some modifications to suit the sandbox side. Like, I get keeping the directional movement for simplicity's sake, but really, no triple jumps? That just feels wrong. The exciting thing is though, all of the game's problems could be fixed by a subsequent installment, which leads to my final point. Bowser's Fury is a very promising template for the future of 3D Mario. Who knows if this will be anything more than a one-off experiment, but if they want to expand on the idea, there's so much they could do. They could add more power-ups to facilitate the exploration. Imagine having something like the Cloud Suit from Galaxy 2 to cleverly skip through areas, or the Frog Suit from Mario 3 to allow for underwater exploration. World-wise, they could expand their horizons beyond just an oceanic area. Imagine mountain ranges where each set of gates brings you further down a trail, or desert valleys that you can explore by horseback to reach underground mines. They could replace Fury Bowser with other world-based mechanics to shift things up, like weather or time of day or really anything. They could essentially get Super Mario of the Wild, a truly open-world Mario game with a seamlessly connected Mushroom Kingdom. Look, there's even grass! It's basically the same! The exciting prospect of expanding this idea is that they no longer have to divide the fanbase with it. There's potential in satisfying both the sandbox-preferring and linear-preferring crowds, especially if they polish, refine, and expand what they have established. They can continue to bring in elements people love about the other games, and continue to fix the issues they had as well. Bowser's Fury is already a culmination of Mario's past, but it could also very well be the blueprint for its future. And despite its flaws, I have to appreciate it for that. As I said before, there's been a lot of negativity surrounding Mario's 35th anniversary celebration, and to be fair, it is pretty warranted. The limited time release stuff is complete anti-consumer nonsense, and even I can admit that 3D All-Stars is a pretty half-baked package. Nintendo has been increasingly commercial recently, even compared to the rest of their history. In the past few years alone, there's been cross-promotion with theme parks, toys, movies, the Olympics. Even the 35th festivities themselves have been much more pronounced than any other anniversary they've celebrated. It's easy for it to seem overly commercialized and cynical, because, yeah, it sort of is. Nintendo is not your friend. They're still a big company at the end of the day, And with that, there's always the fear that the creative passion behind the games will die as the money rolls in nonetheless. Mario actually dying, if you will. Nintendo has said before that they want Mario to be their Mickey Mouse, but I don't think anyone else wants him to be a hollow corporate mascot that's slapped onto everything. However, revisiting Mario's history, playing 3D All-Stars, 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, and Odyssey in quick succession has reminded me how much love, effort, and artistry is put into each main Mario game. The guy's had his low points for sure. There's whole eras of Nintendo where he was that hollow Mickey-esque corporate mascot. But when it comes to the 3D games in particular, the creators at Nintendo always go all out, and they make games that shape the entire industry. Over 35 years, we've seen them trailblaze, experiment, make mistakes and learn from them, return to already good ideas and make them great. As cynical as this 35th anniversary was, it still allowed newer generations to experience this evolution for themselves, all culminating in a new game that reflects the growth from their past while promising a bright future. And I think that has a lot of positive impact in its own right. Jokes aside, Mario isn't truly dying after today. He's still got a bright future ahead. And I say this with complete sincerity. Happy birthday, Mario. Here's to another 35 years, you funny wahoo man. Thank you so much for watching my video.